Hello, everyone. I'm Christian Roberts. I'm here with my fabulous friend and co host,
Quo Johnson.
and we are back with another episode of Taking the Stage with Christian.
And Quo. One of the things we've started doing, and one of the things we continue to do in every episode, because it is important in our commitment to one another, it is important in how we connect and how we move forward to heal the harm, is a land and people acknowledgement. So I do want to take this time to acknowledge that we in Dallas are on stolen land. We are on the land of the Caddo, of the Wichita, and of the Comanche sovereign nations. Nations that faced horrible conditions, that faced genocide, that faced policy that allowed for the forceful removal by any means necessary. It is important in truth telling that we uplift these truths, but that we also uplift these communities because this is their land. They are the original cultivators of this land and they are still here. I also want to take the time to acknowledge that we are on stolen land that is built by stolen labor. People were stolen from their homes off the coast of Africa and brought here and forced into labor. They were enslaved, and through that enslaved and forced and free labor, we have what we now can enjoy as Dallas. But not just Dallas, the entire nation benefits from stolen land and stolen labor. As a descendant of one of those individuals, I want to take the time to uplift all of our communities, to uplift truth, and to uplift the ways that while we have inherited these situations, we definitely have what it takes to heal the harm and to move forward together, to make true connections and to make true communities. So, with this, I thank you for joining me for this land and people acknowledgement.
And we thank you for joining us yet again. Week after week, you show your support, and we are very much appreciative of it. We are very much appreciative of the TDO staff, of course, our audience week after week, and of course, our friend and brother, David Lomeli.
Hey, David, every
Gotta
time.
give credit where credit is due, right? So, this week, we are talking about a topic that um, I've seen have a lot of questions pop up around it, what it looks like, how to go about enacting it, this sort of thing. And so that topic this week is on allyship, moving beyond allyship, what it looks like. So, what I thought I would do to kick this topic off today is give you a definition of what allyship is. And I pull this definition from the Anti Oppression Network, who acknowledges that this definition that they compiled comes from PeerNet BC. And so allyship is defined as an active, consistent, and arduous practice of unlearning and reevaluating, in which a person in a position of privilege and power seeks to operate in solidarity with a marginalized group. Allyship is not an identity. It is a lifelong process of building relationships based on trust, consistency, and accountability with marginalized individuals and or groups of people. Allyship is not self-defined. Our work and our efforts must be recognized by the people we seek to ally ourselves with. It is important to be intentional in how we frame the work we do. I give it up because that's one of the best definitions I've ever heard of it. And I told Quo before we started this episode, I said I would I love the definition of this. And so let's sort of break down some of what that means. And Quo, I know in your work, particularly in your part of the work that you do, this question comes up all the time, especially now when we see a well, people are getting tired. People are tired. They're like, oh, we had the George Floyd thing, and we were so sorry. And then, they have decided that, we had an inauguration, we have a new president for a start, all of these types of things. So I want to sort of get into that. Why we are saying we need to look beyond allyship.
Yes. And so that is a beautiful definition and I love it. So I'm going to go to the definition first. I love it because it points out, it identifies so many things that we all end up sweeping over when we say, oh, no, I'm an ally. No, I'm an ally for this community. I am an ally. And it points out so many things that are so necessary. And in the spaces and in equity spaces, especially racial equity spaces, in those there are often conversations about, well, what do we call someone who does not have the same experience or does not live the same experiences, but is definitely about this life with you, right? What do you call someone? And so there have been different conversations about ally, comrade, all these other things that are happening in the space, fellow innovator, these types of things. But we kind of came down to, regardless of what you call it, it still needs to be done. And it needs to be done in a way that is truthful. It needs to be done in a way that is consistent. It needs to be done in a way that is lifelong and in a way that gets us away from assuming that we are helping someone and assuming that this is not our battle, but good on me for actually sacrificing my time and the things that I do in my privilege so that I can be in this with you for however long I choose to be until I walk out,
Hmm.
or until I stop feeling guilty, or until I can console myself and say, well, I tried and that's not my fight, right? And so, in this beautiful definition that they've provided, I am always encouraging everyone to be mindful of these things, what it means to be consistent, what it means to understand that you cannot self identify as an ally. You cannot walk up to someone and say, you're not oppressed. That's not how this works.
Hmm.
Especially when there is evidence to the contrary. And so you cannot also confuse that intentions do not outweigh impact. That's one of the shared agreements that I always present. And you know this in Dallas Opera sessions, and anytime that we're gathering and we're in spaces where we're learning, our intentions do not outweigh the impact of what we are doing. That does not mean your feelings are more important, but how we are contributing to a system of oppression, my intention does not outweigh that. And so, as we intend to be allies, we have to be mindful of moving beyond allyship, as in moving beyond the term and kind of moving into a space where we embody, or we body, right? We body, we
Body.
embody, we body, we embody, and we live what it means to be in something with someone, while understanding that you do not have the exact same experience, but you're definitely committed to making sure that they don't have to have different experiences anymore, or different experiences that are negative and that affect them negatively anymore. We will have different experiences because we're from different spaces. We're all different people individually, literally. And but making sure that we move beyond just the term "I'm an ally" or what it means to be an ally, to moving into, it's not a matter of helping. It's not that maternalistic approach of, I'm going to help you because I can, as much as it is seeing that we're all suffering from this system and doing what we must, doing what we have to do, doing what we don't have any other choice to do, and that is to make sure that we're working together to dismantle it. We have different privileges in different spaces, and when we use certain tactics in some spaces, that can be oppressive to others in other spaces. So we have to be mindful of what that means. And that's especially for a lot of white allies, right? If we're looking at racial justice, if we're looking at racial equity, and not just white allies, any allies, but a lot of times white allies, and what it means as in speaking up and speaking for someone, sometimes that turns into silencing others,
Hmm.
especially in places and in spaces where someone who identifies as Black, Indigenous, or a person of color should be speaking. So we want to be mindful what that means to move and give space. That's the same for gender. That's the same for identity. That's the same for preferences. That's the same for orientation. We have to be mindful of what it means when we are taking space that should be uplifted, not out of guilt, not out of what we feel we can do right now because we feel like it, but making sure that we're committed to doing this work together. This is my very long answer of why this is about moving beyond allyship and not so much as dismissing the definition, because it's a beautiful definition, but kind of moving beyond just the term and the self identification of allyship.
Well, and one of the things that I like about within this definition that they gave, also they talk about responsibilities, and the
Hmm.
first thing they said was, we're not acting out of guilt, but
Right?
rather out of responsibility. And the thing is, lately we've seen a lot of people reacting and taking actions out of guilt.
Yeah.
And the thing about guilt is that It's an emotion.
It's an emotion.
It's tied to an emotions, and emotion doesn't last. So
And
therefore, you acting out of guilt is not a sustainable way to be responsible and accountable and a true ally.
yeah.
So this is an act of longevity. This is commitment. Just like you said, this is
Hmm.
lifelong of us working together. So I love that about that definition. And they list several things that can
Hmm.
be done and what it looks like. So I would advise everybody to go to the Anti-Oppression Network's webpage and take a look at this, and also PeerNet BC as well,
Yes.
because it's one of the most concise ways that I've seen it defined, and then one of the some of the best ways I've seen it laid out as to what it looks like, as far as what your responsibilities are.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this. We talked about this in general, but let's bring it back to where we what we do. All right, let's bring it. And we work in the arts, particularly
Yeah.
in opera. All right, what does it look like for a company that is said that they've wanted to do this kind of work? What does it look like inside of a company, or arts organizations of any kind, but
Hmm.
particularly in opera?
I will say it can look a lot of different ways, and there are a lot of beautiful resources out there for us to be able to utilize so that they adhere to our own individual kind of circumstances and situations as organizations, right? Per organization. But at the core of all of it is listening, and not just listening, right? We always talk about deep listening, not just
Hmm.
listening so that you can find an opportunity to prove someone wrong or to prove how you're already doing this work. We're not talking about that. If you were
Yep.
already doing the work properly, we would not be having these conversations. Therefore, we have to walk into the space accepting that there is work that needs to be done. So it requires the vulnerability necessary for deep listening, and the deep listening that requires that we self reflect without centering ourselves. That's a lot. It is, but that is what is at the core of what it means for someone to feel supported, for them, someone to feel like they have an ally. Sometimes it is speaking up on someone's behalf, but a lot of times it is making sure that in your actions, not just your words or your opportunity to have the platform, that in your actions you are presenting platforms that you are protecting in a way that allows you to do so because of your privilege.
Hmm.
And it requires acknowledging that you have privilege first and foremost. We all have privileges in different ways, some more than others, a lot more than others. That privilege is real. We have to acknowledge it if we are going to work to dismantle it. So, the acknowledgement of those things, acknowledgement of the vulnerability necessary to be in spaces with others, and then to listen without centering our own experiences, for white people to listen without centering their own experiences in a combative way. Do you know how tiring it is to have to explain to you while also having to explain to you while also having to explain to you while then also having to it's tiring. So let's just all work together so that we can understand what it means and the things that are actually happening in this system. None of us created it, right? So none of us actually put this together. We have all inherited these things, which is such a freeing thing because that means this is not an individual reflection of us as a person, right? Or of our intentions. We want to get out of that binary thinking of good person does this, bad person does this,
Hmm.
right? We want to move into spaces where we listen, where we consider what changes we can make based on what we have heard, not on what we think, not on what we feel is true, because a lot of times we don't know how other people are feeling, especially from other communities. So listening is definitely necessary, but in order for you to listen, you have to make sure that there's a space for people to speak. And
It's
that's what
creating that environment.
and that's what this looks like. This looks like making sure that you're committed to creating the space for people to speak. That looks like how we become allies with our organizations, how we become allies with our community partners, how we become allies with anyone with whom we're wanting to do this work with. It's the same. I'm going to bring it back into opera. I always talk about music theory. I always talk about performance based thinking. It is the exact same thing of what it means to trust that those who are in the space with you are there because y'all are wanting to do the same thing.
That's it.
You're wanting to tell the story. You're wanting to create music. You're wanting to create opportunities for people to engage with this art form. What does it mean for us to make sure that our organizations are spaces where we want to ensure that those people feel like they belong, that everyone feels like they belong, while acknowledging that that requires that we do some woodshedding, right? Requires that we do some workshopping, requires that we look at truth, that we look at what's at the center, and that some get more resources and attention than others, some get more opportunities than others because those things have not existed in the past. So, in order to be an ally, you have to remove self.
Yeah.
You have to remove self, but not in a way that is self deprecating, but in a way that is releasing you from the responsibility of knowing everything. You're still responsible. You're still
Yeah.
responsible for making sure that you're showing up and doing what you need to do. You're not responsible for knowing everything. You're not going to know everything. Not responsible for being right all the time. I will not be right all the time. But it is definitely removing self and centering that connection with others so that we can uplift those around us as we ourselves are uplifted as well.
I like to think of it as, because we say all the time that this is going to look and feel different. You say that all the
Mhm.
time. And I like it because it reminds me of approaching a new work,
Yeah.
one that's never been done before. We have the tools, we have the training, we have the skill, but it's not Mozart who we studied.
Mm.
It's a modern composer who has put something out there for us to play, sing, and rehearse, right? So we have
Yeah.
to approach that in a different way because we've never approached this piece before. So we have tools to approach it, okay? But we might have to use those tools differently than we've done before. And it's going to look and feel different because it might not have ever been done before. Some of
Right.
the conventions may still be there, some of the
Hmm.
structure and bones may
Hmm.
still be there, but the methods we use to get the thing done and onto stage may have to look a little different, especially if it's something atonal. Sorry, I had to
No.
throw that in there. little little
Slowly,
little music,
slowly.
music humor thrown in there. But I often think of this kind of work because we've never seen this done in this way in this nation, down to our organizations, down, I mean, from the head of the country to the down to our organizations and our offices and our rehearsal rooms. We've never seen this before. So we approach with the tools that we see that we have built out there, the tools that people who do EDI work and who do racial justice work and who do racial healing work and any other
Hmm.
system of
Yeah.
oppression, ableism,
Yeah.
homophobia, all these different things
And
that
even
that
looking at
that
our education system, right? Because we're still
absolutely.
educators as well. What that means to make sure
Woo,
that
especially right
what,
now with
especially
educators.
right now, what does that mean for us to support our students of all ages? What that means to support the families who are dealing with those students. And recall in our conversation with Byron Sanders and what it means to have mission and purpose in those things,
Yes,
what it means to be an ally in our mission, right?
that's it.
Not in our identity, right? Because it's not self identity, it's not an identity, it's action. It
Yes.
is how we live, how we move, it's how we work, it's how we think, it's the things that we think about. And in many ways, we do it because those are the individuals we're mindful of. As arts
Hmm.
educators, we're always mindful, well, what do teachers need?
Hmm.
Or we're advocating on behalf of teachers because the teachers themselves may not be in the space. Teachers are in the space. We're quiet.
Hmm.
You can better tell me what you need than I can tell you what you should be doing, right?
And it's the
Um,
philosophy we've taken in our approach in our work. We've always said, your classroom
you
better
know
than
your
we
classroom.
do, and especially right now. And now we've had to include parents and family and guardians or whoever, especially with hybrid learning
Siblings,
situations. Siblings, all of those things have to be taken into account. The education system is going to have to look different.
hmm,
It's going to have to look different. And so it goes with anything in this. But my whole point is this: is that in this age that we're in, we are seeing that we're going to have to move differently. We're going to have to think differently, and it's going to feel differently. And as somebody who, if you say that you're an ally, no matter what the cause is, you
right?
need to remember that those three things. And the other thing I want to point out, that what you talked about, Cole, when you say action, you want to take action. Yes, we need to take action, but people need to also realize that taking action sometimes is actually sitting down and listening and
Yep.
having conversations.
One of the
Because so many
biggest,
people are wanting to jump up and do
right?
something because the guilt is eating them alive. And we're saying, no, sometimes that action is sitting around and having deep conversation and deep listening and getting to the root of the problem.
Yeah.
so that we can then begin to heal and build out what it
Yeah.
looks like so we can start anew. And so
Right.
I wanted to point that out because I know people are like action, march in the street, pitchforks and torches, and all this kind of stuff. And instead, sometimes that action is one where you sit still and you listen and you talk and you engage with somebody that you said you want to be an ally with. That's action too.
Yeah. That is action. Because otherwise, you're still utilizing the same tools, the same concepts, the same assumptions that you walked into the space in.
Yep.
And 9 times out of 10, those tools, those assumptions are built on white supremacy culture norms. And
Yep.
they're not informed by those who are actually at the center of the conversation or should be at the center of the conversation, those who should be at the center of the conversation. So we run the risk of perpetuating what it means for me, because I have greater privilege, to take the microphone from you, or
Yep.
to take the stage from you, or to take the platform from you because I'm going to go and fix it now. Don't worry, I'll fix it, only so that you can continue to try to explain to me while explaining to me while explaining to me. And then
Hmm.
we said before, that's tiring.
It's
That's
exhausting.
exhausting.
And the other thing is awfully hard to, because I know that there have been a lot of there's been a I've talked to many of people in BIPOC folks who have been very disappointed in some of the things that have been pulled in allyship because people got tired or people said
Mm,
we want action or they've taken an action, and then that was it. Oh, okay, I've done my part. So we have to be careful too about understanding that this is a lifelong commitment. We're not all going to get it done at the same time, but what we can do is plant stepping stones for the generation coming behind us so they don't, or at least put down a foundation so they have something to build on, because what we were built on right now hasn't been working.
mm.
There's cracks in the foundation. Okay.
And yeah,
So
and I'll say that for some communities, for others, I will say
yeah.
for our community, for Black community, and for other communities, right? There has been a foundation, and what do we do, and how do we build on the work of our elders? How do we
Yes.
build on the work of those who came before us? And it's understanding that because we are in a society, that we're in a structure, a system that places whiteness, not white people, but the idea of whiteness, that structure, that system above everything else, we can't build on that.
No.
We cannot build on that because it was meant to separate and divide every single person in this nation. It is meant to separate and divide even individuals who do identify as white from their own heritage, because no longer,
Yes.
right? No longer are you French, no longer are you Irish, no longer are you German. We have all these things, which is mostly nationality as well, but no longer you those things because now you're in this box.
Yes.
You're in this box and you benefit from this box as long as you stay in this box, or as long as people assume that you're in this box. So we have to be mindful of what that means, even within our BIPOC communities, what it means to be an ally for other communities, and what it means. I say, like you said, David is our brother, what it means to be
Mm-hmm.
family with
Yeah.
other communities, and how we show up in spaces to support, how we show up in spaces for our own, right? For our own selves and for those who are with us. And then how we show up in spaces just to learn, to
Yes.
be quiet, to take action, to sit, to be still, to share in spaces with one another.
I agree 100%. So, folks, we have work to do. We have continuous work to do. This is a short episode for us. I think we've gotten through pretty much everything, but we did want to take a look at this idea of allyship and what it looks
Hmm.
like, and moving beyond it, and what that looks like. So, Quo, this is about the time that we go over for positive notes. So let's get our
Pos-
positive notes.
Positive notes. We do not know everything. And I am obnoxiously optimistic. For those who know me, I will tell you immediately, I'm obnoxiously optimistic.
She
We
really is. She
don't,
is.
yeah, I really am. They'll be like, shut up, Quote. I'm like, oh, well. But I
Girl, let
really
us be
am.
mad for a minute.
Right, right. You can be mad, but that takes too much energy. I'm about to go play the piano or something. but but as we do not know everything, there is this beautiful space within that, because that means we get to learn. And if we get to learn, that means we get to decide how we apply what we learn. We get to apply that knowledge so that it becomes wisdom. And as we gain wisdom and as we gain the understanding of the connections necessary with others, it requires that we experience those connections. So, as we do not know everything, nobody knows everything. We're trying to create a world we have yet to see. We're trying to create a world we have yet to truly experience consistently. We know that we can do that, as I always say, together. We know that we have the opportunity to learn from one another together, but we get to free ourselves of the responsibility, the assumption of perfectionism, of all these cultural norms, white supremacy culture norms that don't serve any of us. So, as we are looking at what it means to be an ally, to live, right? Not just to be, but to live in allyship with one another, we also get to the point where we can live in community with one another. And
Mhm.
that is very much what Opera is all about. That is very much what art and art sharing, art making in the community sense, in the organizational sense, is all about. So I encourage everyone to take heart in that, to re examine why you consider yourself an ally, to examine the allies that are in our spaces and without our spaces, and then what it means to go forward, centering the things that actually matter when we are allies and when we live as allies with one another. And those are my positive notes.
Well, I think we have a lot of things that we can take to heart today, and we hope this episode has been informative. We always want to be informative, but crack jokes all at the same time.
Ah,
So, folks, as I always say, be bold, be creative, step out, and out of your comfort zones. Talk to folks, and don't be afraid to self-examine. We all have to do
yeah.
it once in a while, and that's a part of it. So keep doing what you're doing, y'all. We're going through this is a tough time for us right now. We're dealing with a lot. But take care of yourselves. Drink your water, do what you have to do to take care of yourselves. I always say drink your water. That's the first thing I say. But
Water's
take
good.
care of yourselves. Water's good for you. It is. So take care of yourselves, folks out there, and we will see you on the next round. Thank you so much for watching.
All
Peace.
right. Have a good one.